is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads, wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. We've had their partnership manager and training specialist Jefferson Mason and marketing manager Nick Bartlett on the show in the past, and we couldn't be more excited about what they're doing for the game of basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market and truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Beyond efficient reps, Dr. Dish provides training expertise and versatility designed to develop complete players. The new Dr. Dish CT machine has further revolutionized basketball training with over 150 plus on-demand individual and team workouts from some of the best coaches and trainers in the game. These workouts include video instruction and combine game-like shooting drills with ball handling, conditioning, and agility drills. Along with workouts, the Dr. Dish training management system also provides stat tracking and analytics to track progress and ensure accountability. These are just a few reasons why top programs like Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Florida, Baylor, and countless others are upgrading to Dr. Dish. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com. Follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And make sure you mention the Hoopheads podcast to get $300 off your next Dr. Dish purchase. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get out and get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
I created this platform that allows coaches, parents, and kids to share feedback and set goals together and just foster healthy communication on the team, because I felt like that was really lacking, especially in a world where we're so busy.
Ian Goldberg is a sports dad, coach, and the founder of iSport360, a youth sports tech platform. 13,000 coaches, kids, and parents use his platform to set goals, share player feedback, and track player progress. Ian also writes an informative and frequently funny youth sports newsletter that has 75,000 subscribers. His thought leadership has earned him a place on the National Alliance for Youth Sports National Advisory Council. If you enjoy this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you're subscribed to the Hoopheads pod so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to tell a friend or colleague in the basketball community to give us a listen. Get ready to enjoy this episode of the Hoopheads podcast with Ian Goldberg, the co-founder and CEO of iSport360. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Linsing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel this morning, doing a special episode with a return guest, Ian Goldberg from iSport360, coming on to talk about some of the latest innovations that he has out there to help empower athletes, parents, and coaches and make our youth sports experience a better one for everybody. Ian, welcome back.
Hey, great to be back with you, Mike.
Yeah, we are very excited to jump on, find out about the latest innovations and improvements you've made to iSport360. And the reason why we wanted to jump on with you is to talk about that, and also just talk about the fact that youth sports culture is becoming a really big buzzword amongst some of the biggest names in sports. You think about the NBA, ESPN, the Positive Coaching Alliance, Dick's, NBC Sports, all these different huge entities are struggling to get involved in changing youth sports culture. So talk a little bit about, first of all, for those of us who maybe didn't listen to your first episode, what iSport360 is, what you're doing every day to help change the youth sports culture, and then we'll get into the new things that you're going to launch and how that's going to help improve youth sports.
Without a doubt. So thanks again for having me, Mike. So a little bit about iSport360. I launched this platform 2 years ago. I'm a New Jersey sports dad and a coach. And I just saw some challenges in my own role as a coach and a sports parent that I thought I could address. So I created this platform that allows coaches, parents, and kids to share feedback and set goals together and just foster healthy communication on the team, because I felt like that was really lacking, especially in a world where we're so busy. We're being pulled in all different directions. So that's the platform itself. When we launched the platform 2 years ago, I also started a newsletter which to me was going to be a support group for sports parents and coaches. I think we can laugh a little bit about how emotional and how invested we all are as coaches and parents. And I just felt like if I could provide a little bit of education, but also a little bit of humor along the way, we could have a productive newsletter and a productive conversation. So we have professional athletes writing for us. We have psychologists, educators, coaches, parents, and we actually have 100,000 subscribers now. So I'm pretty thrilled about that.
Yeah, I've been on there numerous times to see and read and share articles, and actually put out a newsletter this morning that I didn't even tell you this, but I took one of your articles and put it into our Hoopheads Pod newsletter that went out to a bunch of people this morning. So there's a lot of good stuff on there for anybody who's listening and is interested in being a better coach or being a better sports parent. I would highly recommend jumping on Ian's blog there on iSport360, because there's a lot of great content that you can use to help improve your own youth sports experience, no matter what your role is in youth sports. And so now you have a new feature that is coming online actually today, which is November 1st. But what makes it so special is that in the past you've had to have parents and coaches were the two people that were communicating. So that was how the platform was built. And I know when we talked last time, one of the things that you were excited about building was the opportunity to have kids to be on the platform so that they could communicate directly with their coach and get feedback. So talk a little bit about how you've done that, what the new feature allows you to do, and how you feel it's going to improve the sports experience for players, coaches, and parents.
Yeah, so it is a very exciting day, because today, after 4 months of development, we are launching iSport360 for kids. And you're right, Mike, for the first 2 years, we only had coaches and parents on our platform. So any feedback that came from coach had to go through parent to get to the kids. But we did focus groups about 5 months ago with the parents and the coaches, and they all said that they want their kids to be on this platform so that they can receive feedback from coach, so that they can respond to that feedback, so that they can impact their ongoing development, so that they can communicate with their teammates, support their teammates, praise their teammates. So I was thrilled to hear that. It certainly will be an exciting change in the dynamic of our platform now, having kids join in. But let's face it, like when you talk about youth sports culture, one of the problems is the adults are doing everything for the kids. And we have a generation of kids that is not prepared to have a mature conversation with their coach. They don't have the confidence to communicate with teammates and take a leadership role. So this was not just about adding kids to the feedback loop, but it was also about changing the culture of the team conversation by empowering kids to take the lead. So it's a really exciting day for us.
I think from a standpoint that I think is interesting as well is you talk about parents being on the platform and communicating with coaches. And as you mentioned, a lot of times parents tend to, let's just put it nicely, smooth the path for their child. And
Yep.
So in this case, when you're allowing there to be more direct communication between a coach and an athlete, one of the things that is a theme that runs through a lot of the conversations we have with the outstanding coaches that we've been fortunate enough to have as guests here on the pod is the fact that relationships are so important to being able to get the most out of a player or a team. And I think what I hear you saying is that this new feature, what you feel it's going to do is be able to improve that relationship between the player and the coach. We're going to have this direct line of communication. And the other thing that I'm thinking about as I'm hearing you talk is when we think about who's most comfortable using technology to communicate, and you think about the generation of parents, and then you think about the generation of kids, I think we would all probably agree that kids are much more comfortable communicating online, communicating through technology. And I think this is one way that we can sort of bridge that generation gap, so to speak, between kids and coaches and give them a great way to be able to communicate and be able to use the platform to help them to have a better experience, to get better, to control their own development, to set goals, to keep track of how they're doing, to get that feedback, which allows, again, when you're getting feedback, and especially when it's immediate, in the case of iSport360, I can have a practice and I can immediately hear or see how I did. I can get some feedback from my coach. That's much more meaningful than I hear something 2 weeks later. And so I think the immediacy of it, and just the fact that kids communicate and they're used to communicating through technology, I think is going to make this a very powerful tool for everyone involved.
Yeah, I hope so. And let's face it, when kids leave the ball fields or the basketball courts or the ice rink, we know they're all picking up their devices and they're going on social media and they're communicating with their friends. So my goal was to embrace that fact that they're going to pick their devices up in the car ride home from their game. And let's use the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes of that time for the kids to get some feedback from coach, for the kids to share some praise and some stickers with their teammates, to include their parents in some of the communication. So I'd really like to capture that important time right after the game. And in terms of building relationships between player and coach, that was definitely a mission for us, was to get that direct communication going, because kids told us in focus groups they want to build better communication with coach. They frequently are unsure of how coach thinks they're doing, and they don't get a lot of feedback. So that was one thing. But the other thing that kids told us in the focus groups was they really are embarrassed by their parents' behavior on the sidelines of the games. And actually, I feel like we can help build that relationship too, because if parents are part of a productive feedback loop, it really chills them out on the sidelines. And I think that's really going to help the kids experience. I mean, I was at a basketball game the other day, 14-year-old boys, and I was watching a mom coach and cheer, and she was so enthusiastic until like 4 minutes into the game, her son just turned to her and said, "Mom, please shut your mouth."
Yeah, I think there's all those studies out there that say if kids had their way about what they would want their parents to do in the sidelines, they wouldn't even want them to be cheering. Kids want their parents basically to be silent, is the vast majority of what respondents say. And so sometimes as parents, we lose sight of the fact of who this whole thing is for. And I know that it's challenging as a parent to sit in the stands and be quiet, but I feel like I've done a fairly good job of that after having read and learned. And then I think you also get to know your own kids too, which is important. One of my kids doesn't mind when somebody cheers for him, and then I have a daughter who doesn't want me to say anything. So when you see me at a youth sports game, whether it's a soccer game or whether it's a basketball game, I'm typically sitting sort of off to the side by myself quietly and just watching. And I rarely cheer. I just sit and observe, and then after the game just go with the standard statement of, "Hey, I love watching you play. It's a lot of fun." And then I leave it at that if the kids want to talk more. And I think, to your point, what this is going to allow kids to do is to be able to have that relationship with their coach, because especially when it comes to youth sports, like if I think about a high school team or I think about a college team, which is a lot of the coaches that we talk to on the podcast are at those maybe higher levels. But if I think of a 5th or 6th grade basketball team, even if you're a travel team or an AAU team, you're probably only practicing for, 1.5 to 2 hours, maybe twice a week. And during that time, you don't have a ton of court time. And so I think a lot of times coaches are leery of doing some of those team building activities and, getting communication going, unlike in a high school or a college setting where you have a lot more time to be able to do those things. I think a lot of youth coaches feel pressure to utilize their time on the court or on the field and not get into some of the culture and relationship building that we all know is so important to having a positive youth sports environment. So I think with this, it's another way for those relationships to be built outside of the court time or the field time, where in a lot of cases there just is no real method for making that happen. And I think what iSport360 is doing here is allowing that type of communication to take place, where before there maybe just wasn't a way to make that happen.
You know what? You made a great point, and I didn't even think about that. But you're right. Parents would generally be pretty upset if a coach took a half hour out of a 60-minute practice to do team building. I think a lot of parents would struggle with that. However, I'm sure you've gone through these exercises with all of the coaching seminars and conferences you've been at. Most people at those conferences, the thought leaders in the industry would tell you that 80% of what you do as a coach is about building team culture, and only 20% is actually about the skills. And I've really embraced that with my teams. So I think for the coaches who are listening to this podcast, have the confidence at the beginning of the season to tell that to your team parents, that you're going to spend 80% of your time building this team's culture, which, by the way, will lead to success and will lead to wins. But it's really important to emphasize that. And I think it will then take those parents' minds off of things like, tracking playing time minute by minute, or following which position their child is playing. Well, if their child's out there and is having success and is enjoying themselves and building a relationship with teammates and coach, why worry about anything, So that would be my advice to coaches as they start the basketball season.
Yeah, I think you made a great point there, and I think it's one that's critically important, and that is you have to make parents aware of, A, what you're doing, and I think even more importantly, the why. So when you sit down, whether it's a preseason meeting or you have you send out an email to your parents before the season starts, or you directly communicate with them face-to-face on the night of your first practice, that, hey, one of the things that we're going to be doing here is we're going to be working on building life lessons into our practices. We're going to work on these team building activities. And sometimes you may see us out on the court or out on the field taking 10 minutes at the beginning or the end, or 15 minutes in the middle to stop and do some type of activity that's designed to help improve our culture and to improve the relationships between team members and coaches. And I think if you approach it that way and you make sure that the parents are educated, people are a lot more likely to buy into what you're doing if they understand it. Whereas if I don't communicate and then suddenly we have an hour and a half of court time and I'm taking 20 minutes of that court time and we're sitting in a circle at half court talking, people start to kind of look askance at you and wonder, well, what the heck is going on? But if you communicate up front and you're proactive, I think most people, if they're honest, they want that for their kids. They want that type of positive experience, despite the fact of what sort of the greater culture sometimes says, which is win at all costs, and that's all I'm concerned about, and my own kid and their playing time and how many times they get to have the ball and this and that. I think really when people break it down, you ask them truthfully, most people will say, I want my kid to get more out of this experience than just the basketball or the soccer or the baseball or whatever sport it is that we're talking about. And so I think that education piece up front really helps people to better understand why that's so important and why you're taking the time to do those things. And I think that iSport360, with this new launch of the kids platform, is just going to be another way to help foster those relationships between teammates and between coach and player.
Yep. I completely agree. Thank
you.
Yeah,
absolutely. So the other thing that you mentioned when we talked before is the fact that it's going to make kids more accountable, in that there's that direct line of communication between them and their coach, as opposed to the parent being sort of the middleman, so to speak.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about how you feel that's going to help kids and coaches and teams to improve their performance, both from a actual playing standpoint, but also from a culture standpoint.
Yeah, well, for the last 2 years when we had coaches and parents only on our platform, I was always skeptical about feedback that was going out from coach to the parent, whether it was actually making its way to the player. In fact, just last week I was coaching my daughter's soccer team. We were at practice, and one of the dads asked me for some feedback on how his daughter's doing. And, I love those conversations, but I am always wondering, does the message get to the player, and how is that message communicated to the player? So getting kids on this platform was a top priority. However, we needed to make sure that we were in line with all of the child privacy laws and the Safe Sport Act, which is, prevents bullying, hazing, harassment, abuse. So that was a very important part of the development we've been doing over the last 4 months, so that any communication that the child has with coach on the platform can be seen by the parents. Any communication the player has with their own teammates can be seen by the parents. So I think it was important just to mention that, so everybody knows that's very high on our priority list. But in terms of being accountable, on the new platform now, coaches share feedback directly with the players and can engage in a conversation right on the platform. The other thing that coaches asked us for, which we just added to the platform too, is a way to share practice assignments. So we had lots of coaches who were using our platform just to type out a specific assignment for the team or a specific assignment for an individual player. So we now have an assignments section of the platform, and players can indicate whether they completed the assignment or not. So coaches can see as the players are completing their assignments. So I think that brings new accountability as well. And I just think it's so important for our kids to understand that when coach gives them feedback, coach is expecting to see some change in their behavior or their performance in the future. Otherwise, they're just going to think the kid doesn't care. And that is not a good characteristic to have on the team. So, we are definitely bringing more accountability, and we're putting a lot more of that into the kids' hands. And to your last point, Mike, about building the team culture, in youth sports, I'm not sure how much time is really dedicated to building team culture. I think it should be a lot more. But certainly if anyone's building the team culture, it's the coach. And, many coaches are volunteers. Many coaches are not trained educators. So I want kids to take control of that culture. I want them to be accountable for their own team culture. I want the kids on the team to give their teammates some praise after the game if they did a great job. I want them to share some stickers on our platform so you can give fist bumps and high fives and thumbs up and muscle flexes and MVP trophies. I want the kids to understand they should do that for their teammates because they're going to want their teammates to do that for them. And this is how the kids can build their own team culture. If you see one of your friends on the team is struggling, had a bad day, send them a note. Tell them, great try. You worked so hard today, but we'll get them next time. So I think this is how kids can be accountable for their own team culture.
In terms of, again, thinking of youth athletes, where it's not a high school setting where the kids are together a lot, practicing every day, and they're in school together. A lot of times when you're in a youth setting, you have kids from different communities or different schools that the only time they may really see each other is on the field, on the court. And so this gives them another way to be able to communicate. And as I said earlier, we all know the way kids today, the way they communicate. They're not picking up their phone and calling. They're typing in messages, or they're sending an Instagram post, or they're texting. And so kids are so used to that being a way of communicating, and with likes and follows and all these different things that are part of the social media world. I think what you're doing is you're taking advantage of sort of the natural way that kids today are communicating and giving them a way to do it in a positive manner through their youth sports team and through iSport360. And as you said, now when I see something that my teammate's done, or I want to just say, hey, great job today, or wow, good job making that winning basket, or that was a great pass that led to the game-winning goal. When you can share those things, it just fosters this environment of positivity. And I think that going along with that, one of the things that, again, I'm thinking about here is just we're talking is from a coaching standpoint. You mentioned that if you want anyone to be setting the culture, it should be the coach. And I think if coaches are out there listening and you're intrigued by what you're hearing, one of the things that I would say is that the coach can clearly set a great example for what types of things teammates might want to say to each other, or how to use the platform in a positive way to make sure that culture gets set in the correct way as this thing gets set up. And I think if a coach takes that leadership role, that there's just tremendous possibilities for what this could do.
Yep, I agree. That's a great point. I think the coaches need to start the season by modeling a little bit for the kids. When they're sharing feedback, when they're messaging the players, when they're setting assignments. You're absolutely right. The words they use, the tone they use, the way they reinforce that at practice or at a game or when they're messaging on our platform is really important. But the other thing I wanted to mention about like the idea of kids using their device to communicate with their teammates on iSport360 is that if you think about all the social media platforms, and I believe you have a teenage
yes,
kids.
Yep. I have two teenagers and one who's a little younger than that, but yes.
Yes. So I have a 14-year-old daughter, and all of the other social media platforms that kids get onto, first of all, they don't recognize that kids are part of a particular team unless the teammates start to invite each other to like a group chat. The other thing is that it's an open platform, so anyone can invite anyone else to that conversation. And that's when things, as a parent, I get a little nervous about that because I don't know who else is part of my daughter's chat groups and Snap groups and Instagram groups. However, on iSport360, we recognize the team, and it is a closed environment. So all of these teammates can be communicating with each other without concern for anyone on the outside coming in and becoming part of this chat. It's strictly for the teammates.
Yeah, I think that's key. And then also, I wanted to mention or just ask, and I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but the child's account is linked to the parent's account. So as you said, any communication that's going between teammates and going between coach and athlete is also going to that parent. So it's very easy, and from a parent perspective, as you just said, the fact that it's all a closed circuit and I can go in and I can check and see what's being said and how it's being said, and I know there's not going to be some other kid at the school that maybe my child has had problems with suddenly jumping in and making comments. It's all going to be closed, and the coach sets that up prior to everybody getting on, and they get their invite, and then you have this closed system where the kids and the coaches and the parents can all communicate within their group. And I think that is a very, very attractive feature that people are going to really like.
Yep, I hope so.
All right, so let's do two things here. One, I don't know if there's anything that we missed that you still want to share, and if there is, please do that. And then the second thing is give people an idea of where they need to go, what they need to do, and how they can take advantage of what you guys are launching here with this new kid feature.
Yeah, so let's combine it all into one. I would just say, please check out iSport360.com. We offer a 21-day free trial for any coach who is setting their team up, especially as we're heading into basketball season. I would love for you to check it out. And honestly, you can email me directly if you have any questions at ian@isport360.com. But the other great new feature in this new product release that's going out today is that there's a lot of new tools and features for administrators who run clubs. So if you have many teams, we have offered you tools to set up those teams, assign coaches to those teams, set up multiple rosters, and we'll be adding a lot more tools for club administrators. So please, if you're a coach, if you're a club administrator, give it a try. We'd love your feedback.
That's awesome. I think that if you're a coach out there and you've been listening to the Hoopheads pod, you know that we talk all the time about how important building team culture is and how important character and getting life lessons out of sports and making it an experience that's not just about basketball in this case, but it's about the greater impact that sports and basketball in particular can have on kids. And I think what Ian's done with iSport360 is given just another way to empower everyone who has a role in youth sports to be able to have that positive impact that we're looking for. So Ian, we can't thank you enough for jumping on with us here this morning and telling us about your newest release with iSport360. I think it's going to be a great tool for coaches, parents, and kids to be able to help improve their experience in youth sports. So thanks for jumping on with us. Really appreciate it.
Without a doubt, great to be here and wishing everyone a great basketball season.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone out there for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.